Hello and welcome. My name is Ben Hales with Transform My Poker, and today I'm tackling a problem that many of you have, because I know, because you write in and tell us, how do I play from the big blind? This is a big problem for me. And so we're going to give some general advice to you on how to tackle this problem. It's a great question. It's a really good question, because on the big blind, you are always paying money every single time. Okay, it's a small amount of money, but over time that adds up. And therefore, it's important that we optimize our strategy so we lose as little as possible, because everyone loses money from the big blind, just a little bit, but everybody loses from the big blind. And we need to make sure we are doing as well as we possibly can. So what is this dilemma? The dilemma is, should we 3-bet facing a raise? Should we call? Or should we just fold it out? And obviously folding is going to be okay some of the time. But we're going to be focusing in on what hands, when should we be 3-betting? And what type of hands, when should we be calling? And trying to give some general advice on how to make this important decision. So let's start with 3-betting, and this is the aggressive option. We should 3-bet to isolate players. So if, for example, there's a raiser and a caller, or maybe several callers, then you want to consider 3-betting for isolation. So this is particularly good when all the opponents involved are loose and you do not expect them to have strong hands very often. And also you think they're capable of folding to a big 3-bet, because that's really important if we're going to try to make the big 3-bet, okay? Ideally, what you're trying to do is, with it, you should be holding a reasonable hand, but you're trying to get down to one opponent where you've got a range advantage and you can make big money from him in a big 3-bet pot with your strong hand. What you don't want to do with a hand like Ace King is to just always call, see a flop, and inevitably have 4 players involved. One of them might flop something big and you've lost your opportunity to take the initiative pre-flop. So that's what isolating is all about. It's really important, and you should be doing it when you have a value situation. The other time that you should 3-bet is to simply make your opponents make mistakes. And if you flat call, they don't have another decision pre-flop, so they can't really make more mistakes. And so on a really basic level, whenever you force another betting round, you're giving your opponents the opportunity to make mistakes. So if you raise with a nicely balanced 3-bet range, you're making an opponent think with some of his medium strength hands, should I continue? Should I just give up? Should I 4-bet? Scratch the head. Even a good player is going to have a tough time making that decision if you 3-bet intelligently. So you should 3-bet to isolate, and you should 3-bet to give your opponents difficult decisions with a large chunk of their ranges. And you should also 3-bet just purely to grab pre-flop fold equity. And I mean, there's 2 main reasons for making any bet or raise, right? You're trying to make somebody fold, or you're trying to extract value. And these are the final 2 things on my list. So the first one is to make people fold. So if you're 3-betting with some weaker hands because you think you can make people fold better hands, that's a good reason. And the more common reason from the big blind is going to be 3-betting for value with your big strong hands. But you should also have some weaker hands in there. You don't always want to have a top 3-4% hand, because then you start to become very predictable and the raiser can just always fall to the 3-bet. So you need some balance. Okay, good. So let's now think about why we might want to call, right? So first reason I would consider just calling is when my pot odds are amazing. I don't really care what my hand is because I'm being presented with 7-1 odds or better. I'm just calling with any two, right? So pay attention to your pot odds. If the raiser raises to 4 big blinds and no one calls in between, you can fold out a lot of hands. You don't need to call very often. But if the raiser raises to 2.5 big blinds, then your pot odds are going to be really good, especially if someone else has called. So you should be much more inclined to call with a wide range. So pay attention to your pot odds. Also think about your implied odds. So do you have a suited hand, a connected hand, a pocket pair, a hand that can do some big damage to the raiser with his ace-ace or ace-king or whatever type of hand he's holding? If you hit big, flush, straight, or even just a big draw, or you flop a set, these are the types of hands that are going to get paid off big time, and you should be more inclined to stay involved and call pre-flop. Third point on my list here, sometimes I'm just going to call because I know my opponent's not very good, and that is a good poker reason for calling. If I think my opponent is going to make mistakes, those mistakes are most likely to manifest themselves post-flop. All right, most players play reasonably well pre-flop because it's much easier, but post-flop, that's when all the mistakes appear. Yeah, I'm out of position. Yeah, I might be holding a slightly weak hand, but hey, if I can get to play against him post-flop for a really cheap price, bring it on. Okay. So the final reason here is if my opponent's range is really wide. So obviously if my opponent raises from cutoff button, small blind, then we're going to be much more inclined to call. Whereas if our opponent raises from early position, his range is very tight. We should be folding out more of our hand range. Simple stuff, right? Okay. Now let's think about why we might want to fold from the big blind. Clearly, if our opponent's range is really strong and they're raising from early position, why do we want to get involved with a hand like King 10? It's just going to get us in trouble, especially really deep stacked, because we're crushed by the types of hands he has. I'd rather have 4-5 than King 10, right? Because you are less easily dominated and you've got more chance of making a straight. So there it is. Our hand is easily dominated. This is a good reason why we should fold. Suited, connected hands, pocket pairs still have good possibilities in deep stacked situations. So don't always fold those hands. Sometimes it's the weaker hands that are going to perform better. So select your hands carefully. Suited, connected, pocket pairs. The other reason why we should perhaps fold is that our pot odds are not very good. And so the flip side to why we should call. If there's a big raise pre-flop, not too keen on calling with a marginal hand. Don't worry, be patient, fold, live to fight another day. Finally, the other reason why I might fold sometimes pre-flop is if I think my opponent's a really good player, the last thing I want to do is start getting involved with too many hands out of position pre-flop. I'd be more inclined to allow the strong player to steal and to look for a better opportunity to make money. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to hop over to Equilab really quickly and show you what some default ranges look like. So here are the predefined hand ranges inside Equilab. These are not gospel. These are merged ranges, not polarized ranges. So we're looking at value hands only. If you want to add in some semi-bluffs into your ranges, that's all great. Yeah, sometimes you do want to do that. But from the big blind, we're mainly going to be choosing value hands for 3-betting. Let's very quickly go through these position by position. So against an under the gun raiser from the big blind, we might just stick to this very tight 3% range. Then as we go against players raising nearer to us, we start to add a few more hands. Still only 5% here. And I'm going fast. You may want to replay this. Or you could get Equilab for yourself. It's free. Go to pokerstrategy.com and download it. As you get to the button, it recommends 16% range. And then from the small blind, it's super wide because we have position and the small blind is opening super wide. Okay, so that they are default 3-bet ranges. Do mine look like these? No, not exactly. And they don't need to look exactly like these, but it should give you an idea as to which hands you can be choosing. Notice suited, connected hands are going to do really, really well in the calling ranges. In the 3-bet ranges, high cards, value hands, more important. So, calling range. Personally, I wouldn't go near ace-jack here. I'd have more combos of 9-8 suited, 7-8 suited, just because they do really well against the big pocket pairs. Ace-jack's easily dominated. Be careful with that against these under-the-gun type of raisers who are going to have really strong ranges. And then as you go through mid-position, you can see you're adding in many, many more suited, connected type hands. Just look at all of those hands starting to enter the range and just look how wide this is going to get. We're now reaching cutoff and button. Remember, we're 3-betting a lot of these hands as well, so there's a mixed strategy, but just look at how many hands you can call with at least 41%. Now you can go wider at times. And then from the small, when the small blind raises into you, it's going to depend a lot on the size of the raise and your pot odds. But of course, you can go any two at times. You can certainly stick to 70% range for defending. So here, this would be sort of 45% call, 25% 3-bet. Okay, and just folding out the bottom. The bottom 20, 25, 30% of your hands, and that's really healthy. All right, food for thought, and I hope you found that interesting. So here's our final slide. It's about adjustments to these types of ranges. We've already talked about some of them. I've just got 3 thoughts for you. Firstly, think about stack size. Okay, if you're playing at a shorter stack depth, that's going to impact on your optimal 3-bet and call ranges. If you're in a tournament at 20 big blinds, of course, you're going to be 3-bet shoving a lot of hands. You're not going to be doing as much calling. So that's going to warp these ranges considerably, okay? Secondly, and I mentioned this point before, if your opponent's really good, don't go trying to look for marginal spots to play out of position against him. Do some more folding. You're not wimping out. It's just smart poker. Look for spots where you can play against weaker opponents and avoid spots where you're playing at a disadvantage against a really good player. And then my very final point is about opponents again, and just a specific example of how you can adjust your strategy when you know quite a lot about your opponent's behavior. So if, for example, you come across an opponent who, let's say, steals really often from cutoff, button, small blind, but he also will respect a 3-bet and he has a high fold to 3-bet statistic. And you get quite a lot of decent players who fall into this mold. These are guys you can attack with your 3-bet strategy. Widen your 3-bet range. Include lots of semi-bluffing hands like ace 5 suited, ace 3 suited. These types of hands are going to do really well because you don't really want to be calling with them. You want to be making them fold with them. You can call with a lot of strong hands, you know, ace queen, call. Even queen queen, just call. You don't always have to 3-bet against these players. If they're going to fold, you want to be cashing in on them by actually seeing a flop. And so I'd recommend thinking about your 3-bet strategy according to the opponent in front of you. Lots to think about there. I hope you have digested that and enjoyed the video. If you did, perhaps you could leave us some Facebook likes down below and add comments, questions. I'll be happy to get back to you. My name's Ben Hales with Transform My Poker. Thanks for listening.